come to you, giving you all the praise, the honor, and glory. Thanking you again for this day. Thanking you for this very hour where we can study, sit down and study your word together, Lord. We pray now that you would feed us with wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, so that we might be able to see something that the other three might not see, and be able to bring that to your table, so that we might get a better understanding of your word and how we might apply it in our lives and how we might use it to win someone else to Christ. We pray for those that are on their way. We pray for the pastor, and we pray for those in the Second Baptist Church and within our families that are sick and going through trials and tribulations. We just pray that you continue to bless us, keep us in the hollow of your hand in everything we do. Now let us decrease and you increase as we study your word. In the name of Jesus we pray. Amen. Amen. We're on John 5. We see like just went through 4. I'm thinking, I was just thinking. Do you have any, how many copies of that?
Oh, I can definitely make more.
Okay.
I just literally got everything down. So I write down, I think like a week or two ago.
Okay.
Yeah, but I'll definitely, I mean, if anybody wants to.
Okay.
But also, I think if you look at the top, ChristianCourier.com.
Okay, I'll figure out that. No, I was thinking about Margaret and her daughter.
Yeah.
How that, you know, it might even shed some light on it for them.
Yeah. Well, not being funny. Feel good if the two of you read Pastor Thomas Oliver. Read if you feel comfortable with it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Because like you were just saying a few moments ago, like the movie, you know, because I'm not saying for people to go there instead of reading the Bible, but to me it was a good study aid, if I can call it, or a nice commentary.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Some of that book, when we got that book of Revelation, there's some things in there sort of contrary to the Bible, you know, to the Bible. But it was like interested, you know, like that. I understand what you mean.
Yeah. But I'm a big believer in if you really want to know, you won't wait for somebody else.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think that's where some of the studying, you gotta look at it, and then, like I try to teach the kids, you gotta read first, and then you'll be able to ask questions, and then you go from there. But when you're just there waiting for somebody to give it to you, you'll never really touch base into it. Like,
That's right.
It's more,
That's right.
controversial to you. But read it first, and then ask a question.
If you're an educated person, why would you think that you don't have to read it first?
A lot of people, I think, they see the Bible as difficult, and it's like, well, that's not my job to learn all that. As long as I love people and I'm good, why should I have to learn, read the Bible? And then, we know it as it's an instruction manual for us, and kind of, it's the keys to life. But some people, I think that's why they get mad at the pulpit, like, I ain't getting nothing out of that service. And then you walk out, you're like, nothing. Like, even if it was one scripture, you didn't get nothing, like one thing, like,
Yeah, there's something in there in order to get something out, right?
Yeah.
Read the Bible. People don't want to take the time on, I guess, or something.
And I think, to what you're saying, people, as long as they feel like they're doing the right thing and they're not harming anybody else, God will continue to look after them.
Yeah.
And that's one of the,
He's been doing it so far.
one of the biggest misconceptions even in the church. The very people that are sitting under the word, as long as I don't hurt anybody, and I mind my own business, God's going to continue to bless me.
Yeah.
You just don't get it. And like you said, it's right there in the Bible what it tells us to do
Yeah,
once we become saved.
exactly. And that part is, what a disciple is, that's the person who's under somebody and they're trying to be like, that disciple is trying to be like the person. So if you're a disciple of Christ, you're trying to be like him, and the only way to be like him is to learn who he is. A lot of people don't want to learn about the Old Testament. They're like, why should we learn about the Old Testament? And I'm like, learn about the Old Testament is, learn Matthew, Matthew, Mark, you can work on, and then you can work on Luke and John. But like the stuff of where God didn't start there.
Right, exactly.
Like Jesus didn't start there. Let's go all the way back to the beginning.
I don't know. The more you read it, the more it's like, wow. Now I want to read more and find out. So like you said, fill in the blanks for yourself.
Yeah.
Why is this happening? And that. And then you start looking things over in the past of your life, and you're like, wow, that's related to this. This is similar to that situation.
Yeah. When you have a whole entire thing on obedience, it's like love, but it's that part between the disobedience that man has done.
Praise the
It shows you how
Lord.
long
I told the
and what
devil
God
he was
has
a
done
liar.
to get,
Praise the Lord.
And he wasn't going to keep
Yeah.
the disobedience of man
That's good to
from the
see you.
beginning,
You're
all the
stretched.
way to
Is that in it?
No.
I didn't even notice.
It's empty.
And how
Wow.
Don't know what it is.
how we know, how we learn, how you come to understand how he's a hard guy.
yeah.
And
Exactly.
Hey, look, his word says what it says, and
Yeah.
look, if he cheated covenant keeping people that
Got
way,
that right. Got that right.
what makes us think that we're going to slip through
Got that right.
on just the blood of Christ?
Got that right.
There's no way we're going to go do something and then see the puddle of blood there and be like, okay, well, I'll slide through with Jesus' blood or something like that.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
good evening.
Well,
How are you?
I'm fine now.
That's good.
Told the devil he was a liar and he wouldn't keep me from here.
That's good.
So then he started all my good things. So I do mine hell and I came over and
All right. Came at the right time because we're about to talk about the Queen of Bethesda.
Yeah. And how you stepped into the moving water.
right where I need to be if I'm hurting, right?
That's it.
There's 16 verses.
Yeah, the first 16.
Start reading. Start reading.
3 apiece.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. 5-1. Anybody want to start? And then we'll just go over it from there.
Okay, after this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now there is in Jerusalem by the sheep goat a deep pool, which is called in Hebrew Bethesda, having five porches. In these lay a great multitude of sick people, blind, lame, paralyzed, waiting for the movement of the water.
For an angel went down at a certain season into the pool and troubled the water. Whosoever then first after the troubling of the water stepped in was made whole of whatsoever disease he had. And a certain man was there which had an infirmity 38 years. And when Jesus saw him lie, and knew that he had been now a long time in that case, he saith unto him, Wilt thou be made whole?
immediately, John 5:9, and
Seven.
immediately,
7.
5:7. How many verses is it?
3.
The sick man answered him, Sir, I have no man to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up. But while I am coming, another steps down before me. Jesus said to him, Arise, take up your bed and walk. And immediately the man was made well, took up his bed and walked. And that day was the Sabbath.
The Jews therefore said unto him that was cured, It is the Sabbath day. It is not lawful for thee to carry thy bed. He answered them, He that made me whole, the same said unto me, Take up thy bed and walk. Then asked they him, What man is that which said unto thee, Take up thy bed and walk?
12. And he that was healed knew not who it was, for Jesus had moved away, and a multitude being in that place. Afterward Jesus findeth him in the temple, and said unto him, Behold, thou art made well. Sin no more, lest a worse thing come upon thee. Kathy, you want to get 15 and 16?
15, 16. The man departed and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had made him well. For this reason the Jews persecuted Jesus and sought to kill him, because he had done these things on the Sabbath.
So we just read from 1 to 16. We come from now, he's come back from Galilee, Capernaum. Okay. And the end of 4. Galilee. Yeah. It just Capernaum, yeah. It was just coming out of Capernaum. So now he's coming back down to Jerusalem. And it says, after this, there was a feast of the Jews. If you want, there are a number of feasts that the Jews have that they celebrate. I think it's in Leviticus 23, 23:2. Just to give you an idea that there were a couple of feasts that were required by the Jews that they must attend. And it's spread over the whole chapter of 23. And the first one is the Feast of the Lord, the Passover, Christ our Redeemer. And that's in verses 4 and 5. And then we have the Feast of the Lord's Unleavened Bread Memorial Feast. Okay, and that's from 6 to 8. And then the third one is the First Fruits, Christ risen. Okay. And that's from 9 to 14. It talks about those feasts. And the fourth one is the Way Blows, the Church of the Pentecost, 50 days after the resurrection of Christ. That's the fourth. And the fifth is the Triumphs, prophetic of the future regathering of Israel. And that's from 4 would be 15 to 22. The trumpets, prophetic of the future regathering of Israel, from 23 to 25. And then the Feast of the Lord, Day of Atonement, would be from 26 down to 32. And then the final one, the Feast of the Lord, the Tabernacles, would be from 33 down to 44. So there were a number of feasts that they...
This was the Passover.
Hmm?
Passover probably. But it was the Feast of the Jews or something. It might be the Passover.
No.
Passover.
The Passover would be unleavened bread and wine, first fruits of Christ,
The harvest.
Now, the three major feasts were atonement. Males of Israel were required to travel to the temple in Jerusalem where
the first two.
Yeah, first thing.
unleavened bread, weeks, and tabernacles.
Yeah, but we don't, I don't think we know which one.
No.
I don't think it says which one.
Well, I said maybe they call that the Feast of Jews, the Passovers, but
When I look at Leviticus 23:11, I guess if we jump back to 10,
Yeah.
it says, sheep of the first fruits of your harvest unto the priest, sheep before the Lord accepted for you. And you shall offer that day when you wave the sheep, a he lamb without blemish in the first year for a burnt offering. And then I'm like, well, why would, in this case, the Bible mention the sheep market?
I'm sorry, try it again?
Like when you go through 10 through, I'm going to say 12,
Okay. Right.
and you're reading, and then 12 talks about the sheep or the lamb, and then when you come back to John 5, where it talks about either the sheep market.
It says the sheep was actually an omen. About 2 quarts presented to the Lord on the second day of the feast of unleavened bread. The waving by the priest before the Lord may have involved making the sign of the cross. This token offering was accompanied by burnt grain and drink offerings. So the ceremony acknowledged God as the real author of all the land's crops by making a representative presentation of the crops to him. So that sheep in regards to the fruits. Because the Feast of the Fruits, the Feast of the Tabernacle was the one that, I think that was the only one that was, they were commanded, they had, to, it was commanded under the Feast of the Tabernacle. And that one was like a, was it 30 day? It was a 30-day celebration that they had to, like, yeah, it's like they were commanded to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of children, we were saying the details.
Yeah, no, 7 days in a row.
7 days.
Yeah.
7 days you shall offer an offering of the first fruits. What's this? Yeah. We really don't it really doesn't say which feast it was though. All we know is that it was one of the 7. You know.
we know what time of year it was, we know. And says a Jewish festival.
And mine says April 28 AD.
No, I mean John 1.
Yeah, that's when you said the time of year, and it says. If there's a section where there's called the harmony of the
We're dealing
gospels,
with 5, and we're going
and then they give you a
with
chronological.
regards to the feast. Going from there. So,
I think this was a feast of the
I mean, you would go down to the day, they say it's gonna be.
yeah, but they don't say which one, and that's what we were just talking about, just the 7. In regards to the feast of what they
The
normally
feast
do.
of the chart there.
Leviticus 23.
Yeah, which is, yeah, 23 and 2.
The there's seven that are listed there.
So if we knew exactly one, like what month was like he was going down there,
Certain types of feasts that they.
easier to pick it out.
The Passover, unleavened bread, and first fruits all had to be done March 8th.
Okay? So, after this, there was a feast of the Jews. There's not enough information to let us know which feast
Yeah.
of the seven feasts of the Jews at this time that it was. Jesus went up to Jerusalem. And if you notice the direction of Galilee to Jerusalem, and I forget what Pastor said, but he said whenever they're going to Jerusalem, they reference to they're going up to Jerusalem. You know? And if you notice the direction of Capernaum, you have to come south from Capernaum to go down to Jerusalem.
From Galilee to Jerusalem was up.
You're going south. Yeah. See on verse 1 it says, went up to Jerusalem.
I didn't understand how that could be.
Oh, what I was saying.
From Galilee, how it would be up, it would be down.
Yeah, but the Bible always references going up to Jerusalem.
The Sea of Galilee is one of the lowest places on earth, that much in it. It's something like an incredible 150 to 250 feet below sea level.
Maybe that means they're going up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was up from there.
Maybe because it's set up.
Yeah.
Now there is at Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool which is called in the Hebrew tongue Bethesda, which means the house of mercy, having 5 porches. In these lay a great multitude of impotent folk, of blind, lame, paralyzed, waiting for the moving of the water. For an angel went down at a certain season into the pool and troubled the water. Whosoever then first, after the troubling of the water, stepped in, was made well of whatever disease he had. Okay, so the scene has been set for us. These are a great multitude of impotent folks. So, you can visualize people around this pool just waiting for a certain time of the season. For the water to be troubled and the angel will go down and trouble the water. And it's basically first come, first served. It's a terrible way of putting it. That's the way it is. For an angel went down at a certain season into the pool and troubled the water. Whosoever first, after trouble of the water, stepped in, was made well. In some translation, it means whole, of whatever disease he had.
For the rest of them, wait for the next time.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting how this story starts to unfold. And so now we get down to more details, and he says, and a certain man was there who had an infirmity of 38 years. Now we know this guy, he's a little bit older than Jesus. 38 years old. And later on we're going to find something else about him too I thought was interesting. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had been thus now a long time, he saith unto him, wilt thou be made well? And, if you stop right there, it goes to show you Jesus knows all about us and what infirmities that we're going through ourselves. And the man was laying there.
So this poor man was laying there every time, all these years, and couldn't get into the water, so he kept coming back.
And he had infirmity for 38 years. Now look at that. Yeah, but look at that. And a certain man was there who had an infirmity of 38 years. It doesn't say how old he is.
saying he was laying there,
Yeah.
waiting for the water to be stirred up for all these years and knowing he's never going to be the first to get in
Mhm.
because he had no one to help him. But he kept coming back anyway.
Well,
He had that condition before
Didn't
Jesus
really
was
leave.
born.
Hmm?
He was in that condition before Jesus was born.
Verse 7, the impotent man answered him, Sir. Did I skip something?
No.
You did 6.
Yeah, I did. 6. I did 6?
Yeah.
Made him whole.
Yeah, he made whole.
Well, now you-
Okay.
Jesus asked him a question.
Okay, when Jesus. I had to read it in my mind, man. Okay.
I didn't
Verse
know.
7.
Sorry.
Yeah. Stop it, Kathy. Verse 7. The impotent man answered him, Sir, I have no man, when the water is troubled, to put me into the pool. But while I am coming, another stepped down before me. So we see right away the man had 2 problems. He was laying there. He had a problem for 38 years, had an infirmity for 38 years. And Jesus recognized him, he had been there for a long time.
It's interesting though what he said, but while I am coming, it's like he was probably dragging himself to the pool maybe when he was trying to get there. And someone else got there before him.
He said, I have no man when the water is troubled to put me into the pool.
I don't have help.
And that's and something, you look at that too. You can't look for man to help you out in things that we do. If you look for only God, you know, he's the only one that can help you and save you out of your sins. But while I am coming, another step down before me. And you're always going, woe is me, woe is me. You know, no matter how long you might go through something, but still the Lord knew him. It says in verse 6, the Lord knew that he had been there for a long time. Verse 8, Jesus said unto him, Rise, take up thy bed, and walk. Now, when Jesus gives you a command, you know, how can all of us say that whenever he told us to do something, we went ahead and did it? Or did we sit there and question it in our mind and say, you know, is that really the Lord talking to me? You know, but he says, take up thy bed and walk. Now, when I was younger, when I read that, I was thinking, wow. I would look at my bed and I'd be like, man, it's strong, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. It was like
They were like going camping.
like going camping, yeah.
You know,
It's like,
you don't take your bed out.
Can
Much
I
as
say
your mom might have
something
told you
about
to.
that?
Right.
Talking about how big that is.
Yeah.
After my husband died, we moved up here,
Mm-hmm.
and we walked past, my daughter Christine and I walked past that cemetery around the corner. And she asked me what it was, and I said, well, when people die, they go to heaven. They are in there, and I tried to explain what a coffin was. I said, it's like a house for the body, for the person to lie in. And they go, and God brings them up to heaven. And she looked at me, and she was about 5 years old. She looked at me and said, boy, God must be awful strong if he can lift up a house.
He can move a mountain, he can move a
That's
house.
right, lift up a house, to get up to heaven.
But to take up that bed and walk, we understand that to be a mat. So,
Now, you remember this guy was at his house. He wasn't
right,
home.
yeah, right.
He was laying out there waiting for the angel to come by to stir the water up.
Yeah,
So they were all camping out, they all went down there, a
right.
whole bunch of people
Mhm.
went down there looking. So it wasn't
Just
a bed
Yeah.
like you'd have at your house.
Yeah,
They
but
probably had a
even-
bed like that too at home,
But
but they didn't take it there with them.
in the most, from what I understand, from what I read, they said they were mostly mats.
Yeah,
That
that's
they
what
were
that
laying
is,
there.
yeah.
So he thought it was nothing when he said take up his bed and walk. He
Yeah.
just rolled up and up. Just like we used to see the Westerners, the cowboys.
Exactly. Put it on
Yeah.
that horse. They had
Yeah,
that on the horse.
roll it up, throw it under your arm and get the step in.
Yeah.
And so Jesus said, take up that bed and walk. And immediately the man was made well and took up his bed and walked. And the same day was the Sabbath. So, it's not a gradual thing that we see that happens here. It says in verse 9, immediately the man was made well, or whole in some translation, and took up his bed and walked. And the same day was the Sabbath day. And Sabbath is our Saturday. Yeah. And the same day was the Sabbath.
Friday, sundown, Saturday, sundown.
Mm-hmm.
Could have been Friday night.
And the Jews therefore said unto him that was cured, is it the Sabbath day? Is it not lawful for thee to carry thy bed? Now they're at the time they're still thinking under the Mosaic law, and they want them to keep the law more than having the law there with them. They want, the Pharisees and everybody, in the strictest sense, they wanted everybody to go by Moses' commandments and the laws that were written down by God. Keep the Sabbath day holy, no work. So they were kind of upset when they saw somebody, and this is considered work when you're carrying around your bed with you. And
Well, they carried their bed there. They carried their bed there to get healed. If the angel stirred the water, and what were they going to do? Leave them there when they got healed?
Yeah.
On the Sabbath?
You couldn't carry, they said that you couldn't even taking a needle and putting it in if you were pregnant, you couldn't even do that. So, the work in that two things is a violation because of the cure. You know what I mean? He was cured on that day, as well as you couldn't do the healing and you couldn't do the carrying of the bed. So you got healed on that day with two basic violations, like you said in the Mosaic law.
And look at the commandment that Jesus gave them too. Take up thy bed and walk.
Exactly.
He didn't say he didn't just say rise and walk. He said rise, take up your bed and walk. And when he became whole, why wouldn't you do exactly what the God told you to do if he could heal you, if you're in that condition?
But the angel was at fault. Was not the Sabbath day. Because the angel that wasn't the first year she did that. The angel came down and did that.
He's back.
But that was the thing, the feast though,
We missed you, John.
and that's why, like when we were looking at the feast to see which one, because like say the Feast of Tabernacles lasts for 7 days. So if that was going on for that time period, the angel would come and stir up the water. And you imagine if it was going for 7 days and you couldn't even get down there because of your body-wise and what pain you might have been in, people stepping over the top of you, everybody else getting healed, and coming back stepping over the top of you as they are healed, and you still can't make it in there.
Yeah.
But the angel, to be serious about it, though, the angel was spiritual, so they would allow the angel, it was all right for the angel to do it,
Oh, yeah.
because the angel was coming from God. And God made a Sabbath day, because he gave it to Moses.
Yeah, no, they knew
But
that.
it's unlawful for man to do work on the Sabbath, not for the angel, but for
Yeah.
man.
But that's who he was praying to. They knew God-wise, that's what God could do whatever he wanted. And they had the issue with Jesus. Who you calling yourself God?
Yeah.
Who you? Exactly.
I don't know, maybe I'm looking in the wrong direction. I see first of all when it says at a certain season into the home. Maybe I erroneously am not drawing that it had to be during the feast, but just in general. I see a man that's 38 years. I mean, the bigger picture to me is rain, heat, cold. I mean, just imagine that face. 38 years. It's not like he came down in certain seasons. That man was there every day. So that even other people left, it could move a little closer. When you say sleeping pad, I'm thinking, you think that's all he had? You know what I mean? I mean, you gotta think about food. nobody wanted to deal with him. You know what I mean? He's on his own completely.
Yeah.
You know, and then also I see it as, and again, maybe I'm reading way into this, but people that once they stepped in the pool, isn't it interesting, nobody even turned around? It's not even a question saying, thank you, Lord, help your fellow man.
No, but it's like, you
But
know,
see, only one person got healed, because it said that the first one that stepped
Right, but,
into the pool got healed. And for an angel at a certain season or time of the year, and troubled the water, whosoever then first after the troubling of the water stepped in was made whole. And whatsoever disease he had. So only one person got healed.
okay, but
So it was probably 1,000 people there.
I'm gonna be a lawyer here. Thanksgiving happens during autumn, but autumn isn't Thanksgiving. So when you say a certain season, that doesn't mean necessarily, I mean, it happened at
Well,
a
if you had
particular
a Bible
time
like
of year,
mine,
but not
you would say-
necessarily the frequency
Could
was
be a
limited to
certain
one.
time.
If you had a Bible like mine, it would explain to you that season meant time.
Yeah, mine says time.
but that's what he's saying. There's no certain, it doesn't
Right.
say there's a
Right,
certainty.
right, but it was during this feast. It was during the feast. It was during the feast. They only had a feast every certain time of year.
Well, as Kathy pointed out, since there were 7 feasts, 3 of them were celebrated in March and April. Okay, so even though that feast occurred, I think that the pool, the troubling, et cetera, I'm saying, okay, it happened, but do you think, this is a man that if he's in a position where he can't travel, so it's not like he just got up and went away. He still stayed there. I mean, this is someone who 38 years is at that spot.
Maybe that man was from that town.
Yeah, but
Yeah, but you don't know if he was there from that, like, somebody could have brought him down, knowing it was the feast, and placing him there, and it's just like that, say a celebration where you have, with your family, and then you come down, and you might leave your older family member there while you go do other things, and you see what I mean?
Yeah,
That-
but he answered that in verse 7. I have no name.
Yeah, no, but
He don't
when
have
the
no
water,
at
he
that
said,
time.
he says for a specific time, when the water is troubled,
Yeah.
to put me in. That's the only
Yeah.
part that he's
Okay.
specifying.
Somebody-
But
Right.
he's saying,
But I'm gonna interrupt.
go ahead.
So now you mean to tell me somebody would care enough to bring him down there, did my job,
but you waited.
Well,
Yeah.
for 38 years?
Yeah, well,
remember-
you gotta look at the people, what the people have been doing to him for 38 years
Yeah.
too.
Remember
But the
the
person
lame
who
man?
cared, who
Remember
brought
the
him
lame-
there.
Remember
I've
the
done
lame
my
man
job.
that was at the gate, that John and, what's that, not John,
Peter and
Peter and, Peter and
John.
Peter and John, wasn't it?
John.
Yeah. They bought him there every day. They didn't stay with him, they bought him there and dropped him. He stayed there begging until it was time for them to come and get him and take him home.
Okay.
So they wasn't there with him, begging with him, they were there, they dropped him off.
Yeah.
Every day they bought him there and dropped him off. And Peter and John says, I don't have any money, but what I have, I'll give you Jesus. Right.
Yeah. So that's why
They dropped
I
him
preface it with, maybe I'm reading into it, because I see it as someone who's 38 years.
Mm-hmm.
So if I go on your basis, I'm saying, okay, 38 times he's come down there, been dropped off. I'd like to think that person lived, it was the same person all 38 times. Because if you're saying it's selfish people who just, I dropped them off, who would spend the time?
Okay, then to carry your point a little bit further, like you said, we're figuring this man can't walk. He's had a meal between those 38 years too.
Right.
So, we're figuring, okay, somewhere in between there, he got a meal.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? The other part, it was only during a certain time of the season that the water was troubled that you could step in.
Right.
The other part,
Now, let me interrupt you real quick and let me show you something. If you were to spend that 38 times, wouldn't you like to think that, next year I'm gonna make sure he's down there so close that this is over with?
but obviously it
When
didn't
people were
happen
sick,
because
when
he's
people were
he's
sick.
38 years.
Right, no, I understand that, but
Yeah.
you see where I'm going with it?
Yeah, I
see
hear
it,
what you're
but the
saying.
He
thing
wasn't
is-
the only sick person there either.
No, I understand that, but if
And
we're
you gotta
gonna,
remember that when you're sick, you don't care about the other guy. You worry about yourself.
no, but that's not my point. My point is if someone cared enough to bring him there and drop him off there, you think they're gonna do that again next year?
Okay,
Yeah.
okay,
Sure.
somebody.
They have
Okay,
hope.
okay,
They have
so
faith.
now-
That's
You know what I'm saying?
faith is.
Family members, like people,
Right.
do you
you
know
got
it was
family
only
members
once a year,
that,
though?
you'll do certain things for,
Right.
Like you know that she feels this way during this time period. Let me take my grandmother over to the window.
Right.
And I take her there, and then I don't have to be there the whole time while the sun is out.
Right.
You know, it's like I know the sun's gonna come up and she's gonna see it. I'll come back afterward.
Right. But then
why.
next year you're gonna do that again?
How do you know?
Yeah,
That's
every
a
year.
difference.
Right.
How do you know it was only once a year?
Well, that's what,
Doesn't say
that's what
it
Brother
was
Wallace
once a
was
year.
implying.
I'm just saying that,
It's a certain season time, that's why I said
Said at a
Thanksgiving is in
certain-
autumn, even
At a
though
certain
autumn.
time, it could be
right,
every week, same, a certain time
So
every
that-
week.
right. So that's what I'm saying, like, we've all been in that position of certain things, like taxes, okay, we pay them every year, even if we don't want to, okay? And I'm saying, okay, now, for someone to spend that time, or even if you wanna say it was a rotation of people, you don't think that it would have occurred to anybody, say, get him as close as possible, so I don't have to do this again?
It's 38 years,
Probably
I
did.
guess not,
Right, right.
you know?
So I'm saying, what faith that man had, I'm sure you don't think he would even say something like, if you're gonna drop me off as close as
Cameron
possible?
had something
But
to
he still
add to
would
that.
have to get in.
No, but I
Right.
think, like you're seeing something which is coming in other verses now. What he's saying here, you're assuming that somebody is carrying him, but I think this man is a disabled man living somewhere around wherever that water pool is. And he doesn't have much of a family or anybody to take care of.
Right,
And I don't see anything beyond it. So it's not that somebody is bringing him every time or every year.
right,
He's there, he makes it this far. The point of him is, I make it this far every time, but there's always someone who's jumping ahead of me
yeah,
or stepping on me to get there. But Jesus is asking him, why don't you go one more step beyond that? Get up. Don't slide. Probably he's crawling on the ground,
yeah,
as you said.
yeah.
He's saying, don't. Just get up. And he gets up. He really gets up. So I think that's what is.
I think even the rise with the bed. I mean, I saw it as, it's no different than when you're sick. You don't wear the same clothes when you're sick. You know what I mean? So even to take the bed. You know, I'm not saying it's lice infested or whatever, but, you know, the whole idea, like we've talked about washing feet, we've talked about garments, et cetera, but now the very thing that he's been on for 38 years, he takes with him. Now implied in earlier, or I guess inferred, was I looked at it this way. Others, that's it, gone. Left everything right there. But this man, Jesus tells him to take what you had with you. So I'm not saying I had the answers, but when I was looking at that, I looked at that like, wow, here's someone who's been there for 38 years, what a strong faith he has. Jesus sees that faith, and not only tells him to do what he does, rise and walk with the very things that you know what I mean, like almost people, like nowadays if you saw something, oh no man, don't touch me with that hand, you just coughed all over it. But here's someone who's 38 years of living there. And again, Cameron, I understand you're saying, I'm not saying he was carried there. I was saying, because I looked at it like he lived there for 38 years.
That's his home.
Yeah, so now you're thinking, okay, there was no tent over him,
Yeah,
no
tent
nothing,
was
he
his
made no effort to, he just lay there when it rained. He had no protection, no nothing.
We don't know a whole lot of it.
No, but I'm saying,
But the thing is, where he was or the bed he was sitting in, that is it.
Yeah.
Whatever he had, it was him attached to that attached to him.
exactly,
And he asked him to drop it. What Jesus told him is, drop it. Now you go this far, but you're one step beyond.
yes,
Detach, get up.
yes. And the fact that he listened, he recognized Jesus. I mean, that's what I mean, like, when you mentioned a couple months ago about the fig tree, I was reading up on that, how in that region it was common to go along and you pull figs off along the road because they grew everywhere. I was saying Howard had, like, looking through Wikipedia, blah, 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 because when you brought up the fig tree significance, I wanted to see more about that. And so I'm looking at also just the feeding. Again, I mean, I see this man is just so desolate, so ignored, that even though we're talking about, okay, well, somebody he must have eaten, he must have slept, he must have clothed, and I'm saying, okay. But with all of that, even if people just out of pity, like a beggar in the street, you throw him a few crumbs, you throw him a few figs, you throw him a few this man still had the faith to stay there.
Can I read
No,
something here?
can I say one more? The only thing that I was different, I agree with you, the only thing different that I'm saying, this was a motivation. He's saying, this is all I can do.
Yeah.
Jesus is saying, no, you can do more.
More.
Believe and get up. And that's the only difference.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Okay, here where it talks about the pool. It had 5 porches, alcoves, colonnades, and doorways. And there were, in these lay a great number of sick folks, some blind, some crippled, and some paralyzed. So they were probably living in those colonnades, in those doorways and all.
I appreciate
On the
that. and
porches.
I'm going to be rude here. While you talked, I ran across that while we were all talking. And they were saying that common to the Amplified Bible, even Matthew Henry, the area in Jerusalem for years was erroneously reported that way. A more accurate description as far as, let's call it science, whatever, says it was north of Jerusalem. In the area you're talking about, in the 1800s and forward, mentions native in the Amplified is the same. I use a parallel. Amplified, yeah.
Yeah.
And I was looking at that too because I typed in the 5 porches because earlier, I know you weren't here, but when David and Mrs. Child was here, we were talking about with Jesus the Samaritan, and they talked about the 5 husbands, and then I saw the 5 porches. And I said, wow, there's some significance here because we've heard 5 porches in chapter 4. We're hearing, 5 husbands in chapter 4. We're hearing 5 porches now. You know, and so I wanted to see more about that. And there was even a discussion about whether the Romans had built that viaduct and blah, blah, blah. So I jumped away because I realized also we're here to, but I wanted to research that more. But one of the things, because I thought the same thing too, that maybe the 5 porches, everybody sitting there, blah, blah, blah. But as I was reading more and more, they were saying that Matthew Henry had erroneously made this mistake. I think they said either 1837 or 1889. And that they said it was a common misbelief. And I'm not saying that Wikipedia is a final authority, but I wanted to see more of how, because they were saying that there's a place called Bikrit, Israel, that's identified. But when you see the 2 places, no. And it wasn't the only place in Israel that had 5 porches. So I'm not saying that that's wrong, but I just find that intriguing. I'm saying I want more of a cultural reference to see where and how.
But you were talking about how they could have been, living in there,
Yeah.
just waiting for this pool to be stirred up. They could have all been living there.
Yeah, but again, we're not talking like 5, 10, 50. I mean, I'm sure hundreds and thousands of people.
I mean, if we're looking at the, one of the things that we're looking at here is the time
Yeah.
that he's there. I mean, if you look at even how, even in the Old Testament, I go back to again, Abraham, David, Joseph, how those guys had seen a thing, God had shown them, what was going to happen way down in the future.
Yeah.
And look how many years they had to wait until it actually came to pass.
Exactly.
I look at it as long as you've got life in your body, and you believe that the Messiah is coming, in which I believe this guy thought,
Yeah.
And he was able to wake up, and he didn't have anything else to hope for. I mean, this was his main goal. And if you keep coming back, you keep knocking at God's door, God eventually is going to open your door. He said you can't worry God.
Right.
We talk about the lady that kept going back to the king, and the king said, just out of you worrying me to death, basically, I'm going to grant you your wish. But she was persistent in her thing, and that's how we need to be with God. If we're persistent and persistent and persistent, eventually, when he thinks it's the right time, okay, he'll come down, he'll open up the doors, or he'll relieve us of this illness that we have. But the thing is that we get up every morning and we do the best we can to make it to the point that we can make it to that pool and dip it in there and dip ourselves in there.
Even with the feet.
but was it the pool? That's where we were going, right? I think you were going for a minute there too. It wasn't the pool. Where do you pull your energy from? Where do you get your energy? He already got up. He told you, get up, drop. He already did it. Whether that pool was the healing pool, yes or no, I don't know.
Yeah.
But he already got up and dropped everything and he stood up. He walked to that pool
Right.
and he came back and he was healed.
You saying he walked to the pool?
Well, you're right partially, but the point was that other people had been healed for years and years
By going
beyond that,
to-
by going to the pool before
Right.
Jesus came along. Jesus was the healing power for the water, the angel was.
Right, and
The
we're not
angel-
talking about the other one. We're just talking about this one man.
Yeah.
This one,
What was the
right,
miracle?
and what was the question that Jesus asked that one man? What was the question? he
But
asked?
thou be made whole.
Yeah, he said, well, he says, what do you want? What do you
Do you want to be okay? Do you
Yeah.
want to be home?
In other words, all right, I'll do it for you because you can't get to the pool. I don't have nobody to help me to get down there. So, okay, since you don't have nobody to help you get down, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll perform a miracle for you.
But Cameron, you're right. That's where I was going, was to show that, I'm saying, this man, it wasn't a question of the pool. Jesus didn't say, rise, walk to the pool. He said, right, if you have enough faith. And this man is saying, well, look at my faith, I've been here 38 years, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And he's saying, rise right now,
Yeah.
go, take your bed and walk.
Yeah, that's.
No, I know what you mean. There's
Yeah,
the
I do too.
38 years of faith as in trying to be there at that time period. And yeah, I understand what you're saying. That's-
And just the fact that here comes Jesus, who's now saying, he's not even, oh, hey, I understand, make way, over that. Because even though we see the situation as one-on-one, there were still others around who were still trying to, and Jesus says, rise and go.
Yeah, but the thing is, what I'm saying is that the man, he was consistent in what he was aiming to do. He was consistent there. I'm not saying anything about the miracle itself, because the miracle is definitely that Jesus made the man whole. Without a doubt, that's the miracle. But the way that the man kept coming up there for 38 years,
Yeah.
he kept doing the same thing. He was consistent. That's the way we need to be in our faith. Is the message I'm getting from this whole passage here. We have to be consistent in what we do on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And then eventually, the Lord, just like we found out, I think it was last week, we realized that there are three people that take part in salvation. One plants the seed, one waters, and only God can give the increase.
What made him have faith in what Jesus said, that he was able to get up and walk? He didn't know he was Jesus.
Right. But he believed.
You know?
He believed in this man because all of a sudden his bones just were made healed. And he was able to stand up and take up his bed.
But if he believed in the power of angels, then he must have believed in God. Because he knew that angels do God's work.
Well, I'm looking at it like this. I'm looking at this. He's a Jew. Okay? So I'm thinking also that he's believing that the Messiah is going to come too. I'm believing that too because he's a Jew and he's by this pool where the tradition is an angel comes down and troubles the water.
Right.
So he must have had some knowledge of
Yeah.
an angel.
Of what they did, but remember, you keep on saying it, and I think everybody, you kind of, with verse 4, before an angel went down at a certain season into the pool. Now, think about this, that the whole time period, one person
Yeah.
would get healed.
Only one.
Only one.
Out of
Right.
all those
So, but the thing is, all right, who got healed that day? Only one.
One person, yeah. Without going in the
But
pool.
that's what I'm saying, without going into the pool. But think about we look at the angel of the Lord, and a lot of times, and who can you see the part as the angel of the Lord meaning God has seen it for 38 years around and doing the healing. So that's why that aspect of what we're looking at and who this and what that, let's look at the main aspect of the healing that happened and what Jesus did, you know.
Yeah.
Well, in verse 6 there, when it says, when Jesus saw him laying there and knew him, and knew that he had been here for a long time,
Exactly, knew him,
and he said unto him, wilt thou be made whole?
knew him,
So, without question, the Lord has been looking at him
Yeah.
for 38 years.
exactly.
All of that, and again, I'll go back to it, all of that up until, where we are with the Sabbath day, where he gets healed. All of that, it shows that the Lord knew the guy for a long time. And he didn't he purposely walked past that guy, to do the miracle that he had set for him. All right?
Right.
So I'm saying,
Well, let's have
I'm not worried, I'm not concerned about the water.
No, no.
I'm not, my focus isn't there.
Yeah.
It's just that the man was consistent in his steadfastness, his faith, his look forward to what Christ could do.
Right, that's why I want to be a lawyer here and say the question was, will thou be made whole? Will, or, I don't want to use the word translate, but I see that as, will you be made whole? It's almost like, do you really believe that you can be made whole? Now, he didn't say, do you believe the water? You know what I mean? Do you believe that I can? He said, will thou be made whole? So this man is saying, like, I know that if I have the chance, or I believe that the Lord can do this. You know what I mean? He didn't say, well, I believe if I go to the water or whatever. He responds with, I have no man with the water trouble to put me into the pool. That kind of, so he's explaining that he didn't say, no, I didn't. He's just saying, right now, when I try to go to the water, I don't. But he's never denied that he would believe. He still had the faith.
Right.
Yeah, well, I'm saying. Maybe to you it's as obvious as the white on the wall.
Why didn't you just say that? Well, why didn't you just say that?
Because I like to make
Because
sure I'm not erroneous.
Because he says that in verse 7 right there. I have no man when the water is troubled to put me into the pool. But while I am coming, another stepped down before me.
It shows his faith.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Because he's saying, even though no one else, I'm still trying.
Yeah.
38 years worth.
Consistent. For
I like
38
to
years.
use the word persistent.
Consistent, persistent,
Different.
consistent.
We consistently sin. Do we persist to sin?
We don't consistently do the same sin. Do we?
See my point?
Good answer, okay?
No, I'm just saying, all sin and come short, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We don't intentionally, but and I don't want to deviate, but see,
Yeah.
that's what I was getting at. Was that this man was saying that even though
Yeah.
no one's helped me, he wasn't saying like, man, can you believe these people? I'm not giving up. I'm still going to keep trying every day, blah, 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 rain, sun, even though this season, time of the year. You know what I mean? And no matter how close, even if he was 1 inch away, whatever, who knows?
I mean, so many different verses come to mind with this one passage here. I mean,
I look at Moses, let my people go, time and time again. Pharaoh still,
yeah.
because
And
Moses
I love to think of the old time saints when they just, consistently got up every morning and said, okay, it's today. Especially David. He was anointed king, and here he is running for his life for what, 15 years or so? Just to stay away from Saul to make sure he wasn't killed. But I know the Lord promised, he anointed me. There's no way he brought me to this point to have me anointed not to actually follow through with it.
Or
So,
Abram with his son. Can you imagine every day, Lord, take my son.
yeah. Think about Joseph from the pit, and then not only be thrown in the pit once and then going to jail twice.
What about Job?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
No, he won't.
The case of consistent and persistent.
and immediately the man was made well and took up his bed and walked. The same day was the Sabbath, okay? 10, I'm sorry. The Jews therefore said unto him that was cured, it is the Sabbath day. It is not lawful for thee to carry thy bed. So the people all around the camp were again, more concerned about the law that was being broken here rather than the man that has been healed.
Imagine their bitterness.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Here! No, man, get him arrested.
yeah,
He's carrying his baby. No, something's wrong here.
yeah.
You know, both of them.
11, and he answered them, He that made me well, the same said unto me, Take up thy bed and walk. Hold up. Who told you to do this? You know, now we're really getting indignant. I want to meet this man because, he got to be brought to the stake or something. Then asked they him, What man is this who said unto thee, Take up thy bed and walk? And he that was healed knew not who it was, for Jesus had moved away, a multitude being in that place. And can you imagine? Who made you well?
Some man?
Some man just came around and told me to walk, and take up my bed and walk. And here I am walking. I mean, looking at them like, you think I'm it just amazes me that they're thinking more about the law rather than rejoicing over the fact that this miracle has happened.
Well, and I guess now this is the Hollywood in me. I'm looking at it. What if Jesus was behind him and told him to do that? And he had done it. And not only what faith that was to listen to someone who you did not see and to do. PCB used an expression years ago about how when the lights are out and you're in a dark room and someone says, go to the door, and you got to listen to someone guide you through the darkness.
Mm-hmm.
And you would feel so much better if the light was on and you could see that person as opposed to you're blindfolded in a dark room and you've got to...
Isn't that how our faith works?
Again, I'm not just trying to share. Just trying to share. To show that I am growing.
Okay.
Maybe not as
We'll
well.
take you through it and put a flower in there. Okay?
It's a golden star.
Then asked they him, What man is this who said unto thee, Take up thy bed and walk? You notice that, you just imagine the reflection in their voices when they asked him that. And he said, And he that was healed knew not who it was, for Jesus had moved away, a multitude being in this place. Afterward Jesus findeth him in the temple, and said unto him, Behold, thou art made well. Sin no more, lest a worse thing come unto thee. Now,
In the next verse, you find that he believes it was Jesus.
but if we stop right there, you have to look at that and you see what Jesus says to him. Behold, thou art made well. He lets him know, okay, you're made well now. Basically, you've been reborn now. Go and sin no more, lest a worse thing come unto thee. Just like I think we had a conversation a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about, once you come to the Lord, or once you take that thing out of you, that say you give up drugs or something, okay, and you've got that empty building on the inside of you all cleaned up, and now you've been on the wagon for a while, but when you go back to it, you not only pick up the alcohol that you used to take, but you start to pick up the marijuana and the other stuff that comes along beside that stuff. Two questions I have here. Sin no more. Is that because, did he get in that condition because he sinned? Lest
Was he
a
born
worse
that
thing
way, or was he?
come into thee. Exactly.
As the scripture said, to ask the other guy, was it, who committed the sin? Was it his mother when she bore him, or did he sin on his own?
And that was sin because for God getting
Right.
away from it.
Now, when did he sin? It doesn't say anything about him sinning. But Jesus knew that he was a sinner. So don't get caught in that same situation. That's probably why he got caught like that.
Yeah. Because Jesus asked him, point blank, sin no more, lest the worst thing come upon thee. And the man departed and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had made him well. And therefore did the Jews persecute Jesus and sought to slay him, because he had done these things on the Sabbath day.
And what do you think the sin no more?
So
What do you think the sin no more would mean?
we don't have any indication of that, just that he said, go and sin no more. He knows what he did, and the Lord knows what he did.
I gotta be learned. It doesn't say go and sin no more, it just says sin no more. See,
It says sin no more, right?
What came to me to mind was, what would be almost the greatest sin would be the denial of what Jesus had done.
How
Remember
do you
Judas
get that from
Iscariot?
Yeah, but how do you get that from that?
Because what? Sin no more.
It could have been that one sin that caused him to do something that we could easily walk past.
Okay, now watch my reasoning.
Okay.
How many people went to that pool figuring the angel healed them, and not God or Jesus?
Okay, go ahead. I'm
You see what I'm saying?
No.
An angel, pool, stirs the water,
Yeah.
so they know if they touch it, they're healed.
Right.
So how many people walk from that pool believing what? An angel healed them, not Jesus.
Okay. I got you there.
I find it interesting to go even further, that they didn't rejoice, but what man? Not who is he? Because if they were such great faith that they believe the pool heals, and they know that an angel is an instrument of God, wouldn't they right away know that God healed them? The Jews. But yet here, what greater sin than to say, the pool healed me. The angel would stir the water. You're denying the God who's been so benevolent in doing what he's done.
I think, me personally, I just think you're reading more into that than this.
Yeah, because sin no more was
Sin no
that
more
aspect
means-
of the sin might have been the reason why he was where he was, you know, the lame part. So we don't know how old the man is.
Right.
So for 38 years, we know he was there. So 38 years, and then for, like, that sin happened, say 38 years ago, and that part as in God healing him afterwards, saying sin no more. Like basically giving you another chance at life. Don't do what you did that got you in the circumstance that you put yourself in.
But then I see it as what you're telling me is that, all right, he committed a sin. Yet for 38 years he had faith.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But he still committed that sin.
No, think about
Sure,
how
don't-
people
don't
come
you
to
have faith?
Christ. So you have some people that the heartbroken and the hurt that come to Christ. You have more of that in the church than that sometimes where they're coming in there and they're like, oh man, I can't believe this happened to me, and they're in church, and then they're in church, and then they're in church, and then all of a sudden you have some people get healed and they walk out that door. You might not ever see them again. So that aspect
Can
of
I say
those
something
people
about
that get
this?
healed and they get it. Think about how many people have gotten healed and jetted from church, but they were faithful. They were faithful. There are some that have done that. So that part, I said, sin no more with that. Using that as an example.
I'm going to use Howard's term, but I think Kathy wants to say something.
Here where it says, afterward Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, see, you have been made well. Sin no more, lest the worst thing come upon you. And the man departed and told the Jews that it was Jesus. Before he didn't know who he was. But when he met him in the temple, it's like he got saved. He believed in Jesus. So and then, because we're all sinners before we got saved. So it doesn't matter what his sin was or when he sinned, we're all born sinners.
He just said, don't go forward. But if you go back to Mark 2:9, it says, whether it is easier to say to the sick of the palsy, thy sins be forgiven thee, or to say, arise and take up thy bed and walk. But that ye may know that the Son of Man has power on earth to forgive sins. So it's just easy for him to say, go sin, don't sin anymore. That's a commandment I give you. Is it any easier to say that than to say, pick up your bed and walk? That's what they're saying in Mark 2:9. Mark 2:9. It's just easy to say that, as to say, I healed you, now go, don't sin no more.
Right, because
Or
I
you'll
go,
have worse than this, there's a coming by.
right, because it,
Or worse than.
I jump back to 6 and it says, because it's showing the scribes reasoning in their heart, why does this man speak blasphemy? Who can forgive sins but God only?
And Jesus says, go, I'll forgive you your sins.
Right.
He told him that.
And then he's saying, why are you reasoning these things in your heart? Is almost as to say, like, you're passing judgment one way or the other. Or are you to analyze?
Well, the
Whether-
Pharisees was talking to him.
Yeah,
And I would, it doesn't say here, but I would imagine that's who brought up this thing
Right.
about working on the Sabbath.
because remember, the Pharisees, their whole thing was the letter of the law. Their whole thing was this ritual, performance. It wasn't a question of faith. As far as they're concerned, their faith was exercised in works and performance of the law. And adherence to it. I just see it as a man, if he believed for 38 years, it wasn't even a question he even challenged. And I guess maybe, again, I'm reading way too much into it, but he accepts the command without a challenge. Remember the woman before the challenge, even Nicodemus to a point where Jesus said, but you know these things, you're a teacher. Why are you asking me? But this man just purely, on my own, I'm not saying I'm disagreed, but I'd like to see more of what other, I don't call it BCCs.
Well, if he didn't do anything but just, if he didn't do anything but tell him to don't sin anymore because he was born in sin, we're all born in sin.
Right. all the time.
If he didn't do it no more than tell him don't do that. He told him the same thing. That was from the beginning of when Adam and Eve
Yes, they were
sinned,
told not
the
to
original
sin
sin,
anymore,
right.
you
Not sin no more.
So he sinned just by being born, he sinned
Right,
because his father sinned.
but he still had tremendous faith enough to still give the credit where
When you're
credit was
sick,
due.
man, you got all kinds of faith, believe me.
Well,
But he was holy.
even in your walk with Christ, okay? And like it always says, we're still in our sinful bodies. And every time we get up, whether it be a thought or an actual transgression, sin is sin. We can't go on anymore other than sin no more. Because that's what Jesus told him to do. Now, only Jesus and that man knew what he was talking about. There's no interpretation by anybody that can tell us what that sin was that man had committed to get there.
Right.
That's the worst thing we can find. Yeah, there's in the beginning of that it says, and afterward Jesus finding him in the temple. Obviously the man was back with worshiping because he was
After 38 years, you can finally go to a temple.
yeah. And he said unto him, behold, thou art made well. And that's what God does to us. He makes us well. And when we go back into that temple again, that's where he wants us to go and share our testimony with somebody of what the miracle God has produced in our lives. Okay? He wants us to have a testimony for Christ. And said unto him, okay, now I want you to consciously acknowledge the fact that, let your heart acknowledge the fact that you've been made well by a miracle. Okay, you've been healed. Now, sin no more. Basically, put on this new creature that has been given to you. Put on this new creature and walk upright and righteous before God. Now, you're in the temple. You know the commandments, and you know the commandments, and you know what sin is and what you should and should not do. He wants us all, once we come to Christ, to put on this new creature, this new creature that we have on us, and try our best to follow Christ in our steps in everyday life, and let the past be the past, and reach, as Paul says, reach forward. Don't look backward at what we used to do. Look forward to what Christ is going to do for us, remembering how he brought us out of those things. So he says, no more. lest a worse thing come upon you. And he wants him to be conscious, like, you were paralyzed at one point. You know, you couldn't even make it to the pool. Now, if you go back and you commit that sin that's got you there in the first place, a much worse thing is going to come upon you. And you know, sometimes the Lord won't release us to death because he wants us to learn the lesson, and we might have to go through a more severe thing here on earth. You know, if we don't, as Brother David, said, sometimes a lot of people have gotten healed being in church, walked out the door, we never see them again, and they get worse off. Go back to doing the things that they used to do. And the Lord doesn't release them to death for a long time. And then, God might bless them so that they do make it back in, and this time stay in there. He might give them a second chance. We can't exhaust God's patience. But he makes it very clear to the man, and he never releases the sin that's gotten him there, but he says, unless a worse thing come upon you. The man departed and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had made him well. And therefore did the Jews persecute Jesus and sought to slay him, because he had done these things on the Sabbath day.
It reminded me of Moses when he struck the rock.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That even though God had promised him and everything, in full, well, we all know the story. So that's what I saw, the parallel. And I saw the same thing here with the sin number. It's almost as if to say, like, well, now Moses, what did I say? I will still keep my promise that you will see the promised land, but you won't go into the promised land.
But look at all the guys that made it out of Egypt into the wilderness, and then they made the calf.
Yeah.
And which is, now you've taken out, you've left Egypt, but you've got Egypt in your heart. Now I'm taking you out of here because you're just not going to learn.
What a sin, yeah.
But yet, in some cases, he had pity on some people. He has pity on us. I'll say it that way. He has pity on us by giving us grace and mercy, realizing that, we've come out of the sin that we were so accustomed to committing, and we don't do it anymore. But there's some things that were easier to give up than other things. But yet, he still hasn't struck us dead yet. We still have a chance tomorrow to get it right with God again. And we can't exhaust his patience. And some people, he just said, hey, look, the Israel's coming out of Egypt. Hey, look, this is it for you guys. You just crossed the sea.
Yeah.
That miracle right there. And you mean to tell me?
You still denying it.
And here you are building a calf?
And you still denying it.
Come on.
See, that's what I saw as sin number one. To me, the denial would be, after all that God has done for you, what we did. We deny it. Because Adam and Eve, the apple, after all, and he told them, don't fruit from the tree of knowledge.
Well, they
deny it.
Murmuring against Moses. They were murmuring against God.
He
deserved
it.
Yet in God's sovereignty, okay, he fed him the next morning.
Yeah.
He didn't strike him dead the way he did the other ones for building the calf. So who's to say when God will strike somebody down for, or give him a worse condition?
Mm-hmm.
His ways are not our ways.
What's your 15? What do you have? Do you have whole or well?
I have well, but
See,
everything for me has been well, but I've got the parentheses.
And
as
see,
well.
I think that whole, as Jesus shows what whole is deals with salvation. And that's why when they put well in the Bible, where he said, behold, thou art made whole, and in verse 14, sin no more unless a worse thing come unto you. Like I have whole throughout the whole thing, and I think that, because it deals, like, even back in, Luke 17, we're dealing with the lepers. And you remember when you had the 10, and you had the 9, and the one came back. And that's that whole means something when it comes down because of your salvation. So that's like well and whole. I mean, I know that they're missing, the interpretations, but the whole means something in regards to, that man.
Yeah, Amplified as well. Yeah.
And that's where,
Yeah, and there was a couple weeks, I remember when they said the same thing, talking to a married woman, like, where did you get that from? And all throughout the scripture, it clearly says, just a few verses back,
yeah,
and then all of a sudden it's saying married woman.
yeah. Because with, was it Luke 17:19, it goes, and he said unto them, arise, go thy way, thy faith hath made thee whole. You know, and that sometimes with those words,
Yeah. Because that was also, what I found interesting was the word WIST. And the Amplified just was there with, like, any. Now, I did not know who it was. And so, what's WIST?
which verse?
13. In the King James Version,
Yeah.
he that was healed wist not
Yeah.
who it was. Amplified, they just make wist as in knew. I'm saying, but yeah, but there's many other opportunities in translation. In translation where they use the word knew.
Yeah.
So why did you keep wist there? So I figured something on my own I want to look up. I mean, I did a little bit here, but I got a radio station in Poland, it's a pistol, and I was like, okay. But, you know, so I was like, all right, I just want to see where that came from.
Yeah.
And to see if something was lost there in translation, whether it was Greek, Aramaic, Hebrew.
No, I know what you mean.
I'm really excited about the 5 husbands and the 5 portions. I think there's something there.
Oh, yeah. The final husband, definitely.
Therefore did the Jews persecute Jesus and sought to slay him, because he had done these things on the Sabbath day. And this man running around being made well, and all they're concerned about is the fact that this man running around saying that he's well, he's cured, and they want to persecute the man that had done this thing on the Sabbath day.
Well,
Legalism.
the Sabbath meant something to them.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way their way of life. What's the Sabbath day? You keep the Sabbath day holy. We don't even think about the Sabbath day anymore.
True. But at the same time, if you've seen a miracle happen, I mean, I understand the strictness of the law and everything, but you've made someone who's whole, once again, made whole in your community, who's able to stand up.
They didn't care a thing about that, not
Right.
one thing, not one thing.
Well, they don't care if you do it from Monday to Thursday, but you do it on Friday and Saturday, they don't want you doing it.
Yeah, but if it was the one who went in the pool and got at it, it would have been different.
Yeah, if they went in the pool,
If he went in the
it
pool.
was a spiritual thing.
Exactly, they'd have been like, hey, that's why I was saying, who got healed that day, you know what I mean? So if that's what those people that were waiting for the pool aspect, you know, because I mean, in John 9, he talks about the other one going to the pool with the blind man. You know, the blind guy goes to the pool and he sends him to, after he uses the money, then he says, go to the pool, swimming pool and wash, you know,
And then for kicks, I looked at 13 this way, when they said that Jesus had passed unnoticed. Now you can imagine there must have been a few people, and again, I'm just saying for kicks, you know, he didn't touch the pool. I bet you if we run over there and touch it, we're going to be healed. And so everybody, ah! And then all of a sudden, didn't work. Oh man, and that lame guy, oh man, you know what I mean?
These people didn't know who Jesus, I mean, they didn't know that much about Jesus. Jesus just happened to be there that day.
But they knew something had happened enough that they were willing to persecute it in their bitterness to say, this guy, 38 years, who not me. And again, the Pharisees could come up with what I call Al Capone syndrome. Couldn't come up with anything. Well, he did it on Sabbath.
But they didn't know until he said so. They didn't know until they saw him.
Right.
Like say if you have if all of us are around the pool and you have just say 100 people around the pool, you weren't paying attention to them. It was they're still sitting there waiting for the water to be stirred up. So everybody's attention is on the pool. They weren't putting their attention on, Jesus.
Right.
So Jesus comes up, talks to the guy just gets up and
Walks away, yeah.
he's like, I don't need to be here today. I'll see you all tomorrow.
Yeah, right.
And they,
I haven't spent enough time around
you
here.
know? And that's when, hey, where'd Frank go? Where'd Frank go?
Yeah, but see, they addressed it, because they said it's not lawful for thee to carry thy bed. So they
Well,
knew
it's on
something had
God's
happened.
bed, yeah.
So, you know, they knew something had happened.
Yeah.
Now,
know, they didn't
what
know
if-
who
what
had
if
done
he-
it.
What if he'd have got up and walked and didn't take his bed? He wasn't being obedient.
Well, no, because they would have, I think in their mind, it would have been, did he touch the pool?
No. What I'm saying is,
Yeah,
in other words, if God tells you, the centurion, the officer that wanted to be healed
mm-hmm,
of his skin disease, and said, go down and wash in the Jordan River.
yeah.
He says, I got rivers at home. Why am I going way down there? I mean, our water is better than your water.
But
I ain't
but
going
that's a
down there.
test of faith.
He had to do what he was told to do. Go down 7 times and do it.
Right.
This guy was told to get up, rise, take up your bed, and walk. Now, what if he just rise and walk and left his bed laying there?
Yeah, but he said, take up your bed. You don't live here anymore.
Right,
That's-
right, exactly.
You
What
don't
I'm
live
saying,
here
you still have to be obedient.
Yeah, no, I'm saying, I
To
hear
the-
what
to
you're
the
saying.
word.
Yeah.
To the letter.
Take up your
Yeah.
bed and walk, but it's like, take up your bed because you don't live here anymore. You don't
But
live here anymore.
if
It's
you
not your spot.
believe, to me, that's the test of faith. If you believe, you don't question, you do. Like I was pointing out earlier, and I don't want to beat a dead horse on this, but like Jesus sent them into town to get food to eat, the disciples back in chapter 4. You know, and so here's it, they're going into an area to get food where they despise these people, they're going to eat the food that these people have prepared, they're going to bring it back, etc., etc. They didn't question, they did, because they had faith in what Jesus said.
Yeah, but there was a lot of people that were healed and didn't have faith. There was other people, I ain't gonna say a lot, there was other people that were healed
Right.
and didn't have faith.
Right.
The blind man sat at the gate. He was healed, he didn't have no faith. He was there begging for money. And John and Peter said, I ain't got no money, but I got Jesus, I'll give you that.
But that's faith, a grain of a mustard seed.
That was no faith, he wasn't sitting there for faith. He was sitting there
No,
to beg money.
No, I didn't say faith. No, there's a big difference there. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
In my opinion. If you're saying faith was the key motivation, then I'm saying, oh, well. Then once he got it and then moved on, then that's not a belief.
The 2 men had the power to do that. Jesus said, you go out, I'm going to give you the power to do what I do. In other words, I can heal.
Yeah.
But when I leave here, I'm going to give it to you guys, because I won't be here no more. You're going to have the power to do it. They said, I don't have any money with us, but I do have the power to do this,
I
because
don't,
Jesus gave me that power.
I don't have the worldly, but I have the spiritual.
Yeah, the 2 men had.
Yeah.
Not the person
But the-
who was being healed, not the beggar. The beggar didn't know nothing but the begging for money. He was asking for money.
But the Lord still saw the spiritual and the goodness in his soul.
Maybe.
Here is something.
We just,
I
how
see.
God gets his glory.
Yeah.
That's what it's about.
Right.
You know, he do certain things and he did
Right.
to people.
Even if we don't
God
understand,
gets
it doesn't, it's not for us.
Dorothy, that's what you're saying.
Here is something interesting. What I have in here, the Lord Jesus had not broken the Sabbath. You know, healing this fellow, taking up his bed and walk. The Lord Jesus had not broken the Sabbath. The law forbade mental work on that day, but did not prohibit the performance of acts of necessary or of mercy. Acts of necessity or of mercy. It did not prohibit the performance of acts of necessity or of mercy, but of mental work on that day.
I think Brother David said that a little bit ago, that they
The law
didn't see it.
The law didn't do that? The law didn't
No, no.
prohibit that, or Jesus did?
No, what I'm saying, Brother David said, they didn't see that as an act of God, work of God. They saw that as the work of a man.
Yeah.
A man cannot work on Sabbath.
Jesus was working on
That's
Sabbath.
what I'm saying.
They
God
said
can do
this,
whatever he wants.
But
You
this
said
is
earlier.
not the work of a man.
God, yeah, exactly.
This is the work of God.
God, he
They
can do whatever.
failing to see.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what the.
Exactly, yeah.
Because that was our question in 12. What man is that which said unto thee?
Yeah,
So it was almost to say who had the authority, et cetera,
Right.
but they still saw it as a man.
Yeah.
Because in my mind, I was like, they didn't say, who is he then?
Yeah,
You know what I mean? They just said, what man? They'd already concluded God was out of the question.
it was a flesh.
So as far as concerned, was Pharisees, Sadducees, who? Yeah.
But you gotta remember that these stories, when they're being told at that time. Jesus didn't mean nothing to these people except that he had knowledge in the synagogue when he went there on Sabbath. But as far as healing and all this other stuff, every time he did this, they were amazed at what he was doing. They were saying to him, who gives you the right to heal and to be able to do this? And on top of that, you're talking about that God, you're working through God. And God, I know God because God is in me. Well, you are equal to God. And we're not worshiping you, we're worshiping God. Now all of a sudden, this guy's an enemy of the state because he's putting himself in a position where God is.
Because they're Levi.
But he's
All of
showing
them.
them, though.
Yeah, he's doing it.
And that's what the example, like the John and who he's and what he's writing about, and in 5 and 9, and those examples of, and it's like, and it's Jesus' example, chapter 5, that part what we just read, is Jesus' example of, I am the Son, I am God.
Right.
So that's what I'm saying, what's being written.
But you have to
through
understand,
each of those
the other
times.
guys didn't know that.
But no, but that's what I'm saying. That's where he's presenting himself. He
Right.
presents himself to them, so that's what they. In other words, what we're reading, we have to read that to see that he is God, and what they have to, giving them the opportunity to come to him to see who he is. I mean, I agree with what you're saying. It's,
But the Pharisees don't know. All they know is the law.
Mhm.
They have a job to preserve the law. They're judges, they're priests, they're high people. And when you break the law by carrying your bed on Sunday or Saturday, you're doing a crime
Yeah.
as far as they're concerned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you healing on that day, you're either doing magic or you're doing something.
Mhm.
And when you say that I am, the Father is in me,
Mhm.
and I am in the Father,
Mhm.
you saying that you're God you're God?
Mhm.
Now you really
And
jumped
that-
over the line now.
And that's the whole thing of what, but remember what they were waiting for. They were waiting for the Messiah.
Mhm.
So the examples of with the Pharisees and Sadducees, as well as the scribes, what was all written, he's showing that in other words, he's testifying who he is, and that's what even makes it worse for the Pharisees and Sadducees. He's like, I'm telling you who I am, and I came here making it, like example-wise, they're like, well, who healed you? He did it right there. And then now you're asking him who, and he's like, I did it, and because I'm God. And then now they're sitting there, no, you're not. Now that aspect of who they deny as in the Messiah, it's a shame, but yeah,